Nigeria's annual gross domestic product, GDP, growth stood at 3.40% in 2024 from 2.74% in 2023, the National Bureau of Statistics, NBS, disclosed yesterday. Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, welcomed the latest GDP figures, which showed that Nigeria's economy grew at its fastest pace in 3 years. Edun said it was a testament to the resilience of the Nigerian economy and the success of President Bola Tinubu's renewed hope agenda. Equally, yesterday, the Senate said the proposed tax reform bills would serve as a critical step in achieving Tinubu's vision of a $1 trillion economy. The macroeconomic data released yesterday by NBS showed that GDP grew by 3.84% year-on-year in real terms in the fourth quarter of last year. The performance represented 0.38% increase compared to 3.46% recorded in Q4 of 2023. Similarly, GDP indicated an increase of 0.38% compared to a 3.46% growth rate in the preceding quarter of 2024. NBS, however, clarified that the figures were based on the old method of computation rather than the proposed rebased GDP. That clarification was important because some people might allude to the fact that, the reason why we're seeing this positive news that they're talking about is as a result of the rebasing of the economy, but this is not the case. As we see that the rebasing of the economy did not affect this particular computation. But let's take your thoughts on this story, Rufai. Break it down. We're seeing positivities. We're saying that, this is as a result of some of the reforms by the renewed hope agenda. According to Wale Edun, Tinubu's reforms are finally working. What's your take on this story?
Okay, so there was a growth in fourth quarter. Fourth quarter also, don't forget, it's the dirty December quarter.
Yeah.
All right, so you have a lot of spending and activity. To the Lagos economy, I think over 60 billion was recorded. Most of this money were from the IJJBs. They got back. So there was a lot of economic activities, Uber drivers, real estate sector, people that were doing Airbnb and all of that. I mean, some very good financial flows came into the economy. That's one. And also, you always know that there's a bump. Yes, some people will say welcome development, but the question is, what's the growth compared to population growth? That's always still a problem. Because if population growth is about 3%, then GDP growth is about 3.8% in the fourth quarter, which is not the annualized rate, then you look at it and say, okay, where can we grow a little bit further? But it's a welcome development. Yeah. What are the key sectors? Services sector. Increasingly, the non-oil sector has been growing a great deal. There's been a bump in the services sector. Agricultural sector, too, is another one. There's been some massive growth. In fact, I think growth is it's about now 22% of the total GDP. The question is, how can we ramp up agriculture and how can we make more economic activities come out of there?
Oh, yes.
The manufacturing sector is another one. Despite all the economic headwinds, the manufacturing sector, still braves the storm. It does, I think about 8 to 10% of the economic threshold growth. And then you have, multiple of other sectors like that. So it's a welcome development. How can we constantly grow? Because when you look at it, the target of this APC government, when they were coming into power in their manifesto, at first they were talking about double-digit growth, about 12%. After some time, they scaled it to about 6% growth. So let's still hold them by that, because if you grow consistently for 6%, it will take you 13 years to be able to double your GDP. If you grow a little bit further, by 10 years time, you'll be able to double your GDP. And that's why some of us felt that the trajectory of 2012, where the GDP was well over 500 billion, that if we had grown consistently at that trajectory, like 8-9% thereabout, by now we should be doubling our GDP, and Nigeria should be confidently slipping into a 1 trillion GDP. So even if rebasing happens, at a GDP now that we have of about $199 billion, the question is, where are we going to be pushed to? Probably if you even double 199 billion, maybe we might get about the second position and go to 400 billion thereabout, which was as against what we thought that if we're growing at the 2012 rate, we should be pushing up. Apart from this GDP growth, we also have the problem of inflation, which is rearing its ugly head. Despite the fact that we rebased, inflation is about 24%. Formerly in this country, we used to have a CBN target of 9%. Inflation never went above 9%. We also have a huge problem of debts. Nigeria debt to the World Bank now is inching up to about 9 billion. And we're still taking more. A lot of people are saying, what are we doing with the money? So these macroeconomic factors are still there. In all of this, the budget, when you see what we're expending on servicing debt in our budget, is something that if we're put to capital, we can be able to use. Also, the general, malaise of people, how inflation is taking money out of the pockets of people. We just negotiated a minimum wage across 70,000 threshold, which a lot of people feel is not, adequate for them. That's another problem. Macroeconomic problems are there. How are we going to be able to solve all of that? The manufacturers who are also complaining based on the forex situation. When you look at the fact that the manufacturers in forex losses, they incurred over $1 trillion. That has also greatly affected the manufacturing sector. Like Muda Yusuf was saying, yes, a welcome development, but we need to also do more to be able to fix the macroeconomic factors. So it's not just about celebrating the GDP growth, yes, then how can we see it in the lives of people? Go now and check real estate costs. The house that used to cost about $60-70 million, 70 million naira before, it's well about 200-300 million. So a lot of people are pushed down the pecking order. Then how can we, improve productivity, food and things like that? So there are many myriads of ways, but this is a welcome development and all of that. If Wallace said it shows that the policies are working, the subsidy removal was also inflationary. So I think there's a disconnect as regards the policies are working. Yeah, liberalization of the sector. Yeah, we've had more production, of crude oil and refining and all of that, which is a welcome development. But that has also pushed up inflation, which we've not gotten over. That has also pushed up the hardship on the macroeconomic factors.
Yes. Right, so very quickly, with regards to this news, the NBS releasing the last quarter of 2024's results in terms of the economic indices. A few things, thanks for breaking it down, and earlier I'd shared the growth rates, GDP growth rate, year on year, quarter on quarter, and where we have had lapses. But a few things to just highlight. I think one of which will be celebrated by this administration as ongoing, is oil production increasing to 1.54 barrels per day. And that is, very, very good news, million barrels per day. And that's very, very good news. I say this because it's one of the agenda of this administration to ramp up oil production, and in so doing, be able to generate more revenue for Nigeria. Of course, you know how much was pegged for the 2025 budget, and also the amount of, the level of oil or the quantity of oil as well to be able to generate revenue. Oil prices are high at the moment. It is important and crucial at this point to be able to maximize and leverage that. So that's good news. And they say that they are looking to get to 2 million barrels per day and even push to 2.5 million barrels per day. It's ambitious, but they're saying it's achievable. We heard the special advisor to the president on energy speaking to Rolake in that interview, talking about some of the strategies that would be employed by this administration to make that work. So a tick for them there. And then also something I must mention when we talk about the diversification of the economy. Yes, we've seen more contribution from non-oil sector, which is what has been pushed for many years, that we cannot afford or continue to be dependent on oil as our major source of revenue. However, I still think that it is still underutilized. One of such sectors, of course, like you said, agriculture. In the last NBS, when the last NBS figures were released, we talked about how the low level of, in terms of percentage of agriculture's contribution to the GDP was, especially bearing in mind the potentials therein. And so there's still a lot of work to be done by this administration in pushing at agriculture. I say this because a lot of money has been invested in the last few months. We've looked at some interventions. We've had tractors being donated. We've had fertilizer as well going to the farmers. But if we don't deal with the fundamental issue of security and confidence of the farmers being able to go back to their farms, then we'll continue to pump money into this sector without a lot of results coming out from it. Nigeria has the potential and is able to feed itself and even export. So we need to really, drill down and really see how we can do that. And of course, when we talk about the value chain and post-harvest losses, building of silos, ensuring that we're able to store agricultural processes, the use of technology, leveraging technology to increase our agricultural yields. These are some of the things we've talked about, but there has been, in terms of the cost of goods in the market, reports earlier this morning says that as we approach Ramadan season, goods and services, especially food, has come down. And I testified to that. I did some shopping yesterday, and it was quite encouraging to see some produce, especially farm produce, cheaper than what we would have gotten them perhaps last quarter. So,
Gary?
Yes, a lot of things have come down. And, traditionally, when we approach the Ramadan season, food prices go up. So it's quite encouraging to see that, interventions are working there. But it must be sustained, that we may be able to achieve the desired results. We are on our way to progress, but we haven't yet quite gotten there yet. We haven't gotten there quite yet. The other part of it was a statement that was made, and I'd like to bring it back yesterday by Kenny Ogolobo, the spokesperson to the Senate President. I say this because it was identified that the joint tax reform bill would be a key driver in achieving the $1 trillion economy. While that's okay, there's also a concern around taxing our way into revenue generation. Because, yes, they say they're not going to tax the poor, but the truth is that you cannot tax your way out of debt, or you cannot tax your way into economic recovery. So what are the other things that would be, ingenious in terms of ideas and creativity? One area that we must continue to talk about and push until we see a change in that sector is the mining sector. If you look at other countries who have been blessed with resources like we have in Nigeria, you would see the trillions of dollars that can be realized from this industry alone that has been so far underutilized. Number one is, of course, I bring up the security issue again. Two, investment, or the ability to attract investment in that sector. Make it attractive for investors to come in and ensure that they're able to repatriate their funds and able to, there's some gains in that sector. So a lot of challenges. I don't think it is okay to just depend on taxes. Yes, taxes are a great way to generate revenue, but not in a country where we are blessed with a lot of resources and the mining sector has been so far underutilized. I believe that this is also a call for the Ministry of Solid Minerals to shore up their game, to really up their game with regards to this. But I mean, a number of things to talk about, perhaps when we have our business news. We've said Rotus, we're able to take this further and dissect further.